I think anything anyone is doing is language acquisition. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's you are learning to speak the language of whatever it is that's going on. And if you go to another country and you don't speak the language, you're going to flop around for a while until you figure out the language and the flow of what's going on. I mean, most of what I work in is language. Is how are we taking these words, these images, which images, because like we have automaticity, we don't know how to not put a word on an image. It's like, how do we take those things and put the rubber on the road and drive it, or like turn it into a comic book or whatever it happens to be?
Hi, it's Adam. And this is Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly podcast where I get to talk to the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry. This week, however, it's a bit of a departure. We're talking to my very good friend Joshua Liles, without whose conversation and advice this show wouldn't exist. I did, however, right before we get started, want to address the fact that there have been a 1-2 punch hitting our industry lately. Not only are we seeing the diamond bankruptcy and all the things that are coming out of that, but also the tariffs that were announced over the weekend. Many of us saw this coming. There are a whole lot of people behind the scenes who have been preparing for it. And short story long, I'm not worried. I will say you're going to see some increase in cover prices. It's going to be harder than ever to be a small publisher going to the direct market. That doesn't mean that these things are broken. That doesn't mean that these things won't work. And it doesn't mean that there aren't many of us out here trying to find answers, including you. Most of you who are listening to this are trying to find your own answers, and I say thank you. So there we go, getting into this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe so that you hear about our live show when it goes live each month. I'm hoping that Steph is going to put up the date for the next one. We're going to talk about the sorts of things that are hitting us more in real time than these conversations that I'm having on this podcast that oftentimes were had months ago. All right, there it is. Please enjoy this really esoteric conversation with my good friend, Joshua Liles. I mean, we should give people context. Why am I in a comic book industry show talking to my buddy who happens to be a yoga teacher?
Well, why are you?
That's a great question. I think, well, we're coming up on a year of doing these. And when I look back at why I started this project to begin with, you were a big piece of that. Like, you were very much a supporter, and sometimes I would even put you in the role of coach. Like, you were very encouraging for us to work on this, and I think your early notes did change quite a bit of what the show ended up being. Not to mention,
I do get to count as your first subscriber.
That's true. That's very true.
Mostly because I needed to give you the notes.
And you are, I think, in many ways, crucial to what I've been able to develop in thinking about how our physical practice affected my intellectual practice, and I think a lot of the same things that we think about are things that both of us have used to kind of grow our careers. And I thought it would be interesting to have this conversation in a sort of semi-public setting.
Cool,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Plus, and when I do want to get into it, at least one time you have been crucial to a let's say once in a generation art talent being able to continue to do comic work. So I did actually want to talk about Louis LaRosa a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's begin this by talking about who you are now, because you have a very interesting service practice that you have. Can you talk to people about how you make your living now?
Boy, if I had the answer for that, I'd probably make money. I do, I would say 90% of my work is, uh, the title I've chosen is Embodied Integration, which is to say, I do integration post-psychedelic trips for people that go to an ayahuasca retreat or psilocybin journey, or even have their own mystical experiences without the drugs. Um, and I usually um, help guide people into landing or to splash down from other realms, as it were. So um, that's why I was a little bit late today, because I was doing just that, and it might be a little hoarse because I was just talking a lot about that. Yeah, so that's most of it, and from when I met you to what I'm doing now, which you could probably attest to. I was sort of always doing this, mostly just through like we'll call it the yogic awakening sort of thing that can happen in those yogic states of samadhi or whatever anyone wants to call it. And then, the main work for that is just like, well, how do we put that in, how do we manifest the unmanifested? And that's my job. So I don't have an elevator pitch on it, but that's it's hard to put words to the ineffable, as it were.
Well, let's try. I mean, I think it is interesting work that you do, and I know that in many ways you've done a lot of this work for me, so I have some background with it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's what does that mean in practical terms? Like when somebody goes through an experience like that, right? We can talk about whatever that. I mean, I had my own experience of what I think of
The
as
soup.
samadhi. The soup. That's right. This was for me.
That was a good
Yeah.
coinage. I like the soup. I use that a lot with people.
To give that some background for the audience, when I met Josh, I was just practicing yoga, and he was in the right place at the right time, and that he was teaching at a particular studio that was on my way to work, and we really kind of hit it off. And I think partially because of some of that work that we were doing, and partially some of the work I was doing outside of it, I remember very clearly a moment on an airplane, because I was on airplanes a lot, where I realized that while I was in space, like I'm a person in a space walking around, there's never a point where I'm not touching something, right? And so I'm touching the chair, and I'm also touching the air around me. And then I started thinking about, well, I think of this body, this collection of cells, as a person, as a me, right? And I also think of the clothing I'm wearing as me. Like if you came up and grabbed my shirt, it would feel like you were harming me. And so then I realized that the only difference between me and the clothing is the same difference as me and the air around me and me and the chair I'm sitting in, which means there's no difference between me and it, which means there's no difference really between me and you or any of this thing. And I had this moment of just realizing that I'm just part of a soup. Like I'm just like a piece of potato floating around in a stew. And I was sharing this with you, and you said, yeah, it sounds like me like you had a samadhi experience. And that led me to beginning to understand that and down the road, which I find, because that was like 2017, 18, something like that. And we, and it wasn't until, and now 6 years later, you're doing this essentially professionally
Yeah.
I know exactly what you just went through. So
Yeah.
talk about,
So
please.
then my question is like, is there a me, or is everything me?
Yeah.
Not that we'll answer that here. It's probably
no, I don't think we will. But especially
you could totally become like this egomaniac. Everything is me, so let's go. Anyway,
all right,
sorry.
let's so getting Yeah, well, digging into that, like, because that is, I mean, for a lot of people in the audience, I'm sure we've just I have no doubt that this is one of those episodes where I get people shut off at 5 minutes in because they're like, I'm out. And that's fine, because this kind of experience is not for everybody. Um, but talk about what that's like for people who are just coming out of that. Like, if now that you're doing this essentially professionally, you've had this sort of mind-altering, eye-opening experience. What is it like for them entering the world that is the same world that they exited into this experience, but is not the same world for
Uh,
them?
well, certainly they have different eyes. Yeah, so let's, I can sort of like make it into like an amalgamated case and like what I sort of mostly see. And generally, when people come back from those sort of situations, the question is, did I actually see that? Did I actually receive this golden sword from this, you know, magic rainbow or whatever it happens to be? Like, there's a lot of visuals in these transcendent states. And, the ego gets really loud on your return, like, you're not worthy of that sort of situation. How dare you think that you are all that is and that you are a part of this soup? And no, you are separate from the carrot. You're just a potato. You stay over there, you potato. So there's that, right? We have this sort of like, the ego gets kind of loud. But then, the spirit experience that you had, we'll say, is pretty undeniable, which is also to say, like, science is never going to be able to double blind test whether or not you had the experience that you did, but you're undeniably a different person after that experience.
100%.
Right? So this is where it gets kind of hard to, now we move into the realm of storytelling, right? And anytime you talk backwards about that experience, now we're just sort of telling the story about this thing that changed our lives. And my work is basically to use language to tell the story, to create kind of what it is that you want to do next in your life, if that makes sense. And generally, what you want to do is no longer really the thing. It's what you experience coming through you, which is like your calling or whatever, the universe is pushing through you. So the work is that sort of deeper listening, deeper sensitivity. The Jungian phrase of intuition is just like, it's just a sense that is just, we don't use anymore because we're not in the jungle trying to get away from jaguars or whatever, right? It's just like, right. You now kind of sense these things. So like, after you go through those experiences, you're sort of open to this force that is coming through you, this voice that has probably always been there. And so like, when people come back, they have this like laundry list of visions that could be anything from, a hero's journey type motif of climbing a mountain and slaying a dragon to climbing the top of a pyramid and, you name it, I've heard it. Oftentimes people die in their visions and then are reborn. There's a lot of rebirth. But it's to learn to make sense of those things as far as how does this point to where it is that you are in life, and where do we go from there? Which is to say, like, what you were before that experience was probably a bit shut down and not necessarily listening to that voice, and basically not necessarily listening to the inner artist, like, working with you or Lewis or any artist. I do work with a lot of artists, is sort of understanding that it's not necessarily just you in this situation, right? There's some force, their creative force is coming through us. For some people, they go into these experiences with no idea whatsoever, right? And it just comes out. And so sometimes I'm just like, putting Humpty Dumpty back together again before we can even tell the story of where do you want to go with this? But, you know, for a person like yourself, I knew it was coming. I could feel your irritation rise. It was coming. And I'm not, you know, like, I never know when these things are going to, we'll call it like the pop or whatever, like, you know, opening to the universe. You never really know when those things are going to happen. Like, I think those things they just happen to us. And, you know, I think your life definitely changed after that. You have built a business that was very different from where you were at that point. And the cool thing is I get to talk to you in that realm because you understand that realm and you understand that that's where the creative force in you is coming from. So it makes a lot of the, like, you know, do I get to say like anything I want here?
Please. Yes. No, this is a grown-up show. Yeah.
So, well, no, I'm going to say something that maybe you don't want published, which is
please. No, that's interesting. Yeah, go for it.
Well, like, let's say you're working for a company and they don't pay you.
Yeah.
That you and I can talk on this deep level or whatever. But one of the things, like, when we were building, I didn't build this, you built this, but like my vision for you was like what your vision when you first started Prana, which is like, you're the hub of the wheel. Right. And as things kind of like got going, it's easy to get pulled sort of in one direction or another.
Yeah.
And as we were building this, I think my vision for you is like, how do we just get you back to what you wanted to do in the beginning, which is like, you know the ins and outs of it. Like, I don't know anything about comics. Like, I'm the least comic insider.
Right.
But that's why you hire somebody that, like, you know how the printing thing, like, as you've explained it to me, it's like, you know, from pencil lead to, you know, somebody bought this and is now excited about this and is now sharing, you know, every single thing that is in between that thing.
Yeah.
But your vision is more total. Right. Versus, like, you don't work with just artists. You don't work with just publishers. You don't work with just printers. And for me to be able to be like, okay, when you experience that soup, you are the hub of the wheel. You are the middle of all the circumstances that are going on around you. How do we make sure that this podcast reflects you as that, so that when people come to you, they know that no, you're not going to go sharpen the artist pencil, and no, you're not going to go sit and like sling, some comic. Maybe you will go to a comic book store because I think you really like comic book stores. But
I do.
Like, you're.
Yeah.
I mean, I walked into one and you see, like, and I wait at the door because it's not my realm.
Yeah.
But
I get it.
You come alive in those sort of situations, but. The main thing was just like, how does Adam stay in the middle? Because I think that's where you are the most effective. And it goes back to that moment of, like, you being in the suit. You are the center of the circumstances. And then we get to, like, worth, like, and worthiness. And doing the thing that you know you need to do without apology versus getting pulled in one direction or another, or getting pulled too far to one business or pulled too far to another business where they don't actually end up getting the best out of you. And I've watched that happen. I've watched you had some good business deals, and I've watched you had some bad business deals. And, you know, for me as like a really, really good friend and somebody that I care about, all I want you to do is be Adam. Right. And then, like, I think as Adam, you are the most valuable.
Yeah, I believe that. I definitely believe that, and I know that I feel like we as a company are most effective when I can see the whole board.
Sorry, I didn't mention that you're a we. I only talk to you, so it's
No,
I know
I
that you have
understand.
employees, etc. So apologies
Yeah.
to everyone at Prana DM.
Not at all. Not at all. We are a team, and I you know, but as the leader of that team, it is my job to make sure that we're heading in the direction where we're all the most effective we can be. And I'm realizing that I am the most effective when we're not pulled off center. I love that idea of the wheel. You know, if you put the hub of the wheel too far to one side, it is not an efficient machine. So yeah, I like that that
Or I
metaphor.
mean, like in the pure yogic terms, it is stillness. The hub of the will is
Yeah.
still. The fortunes
Yeah.
come, the fortunes go, but Adam and Prana DM are still Adam and Prana DM, right? And that to me is
Yeah.
like you hold that center stillness, and companies will do well with you in that position. Like companies that work with you get the best Adam when he's not going up and down with the fortune, right?
Yeah, I believe that, and it has been my experience, and I think that's but it's tough. There is some energetic working, making sure that we don't get pulled in too far in one direction.
Totally.
You know, because those opportunities can get really interesting, and you like want to chase that down.
But also sometimes you got to, right?
Yeah.
You know, every system breaks. So if you stick too much to being the hub of the wheel, then you might miss out on the fun. So, you know, that's kind of the thing, is like sometimes you do have to chase the rabbit down the hole. And
that's a good point. Yeah. You know, it's funny. You think about any good yoga practice, any good session, as it were, in that sort of physical practice, you're constantly pushing in one direction or another, so that when you return to center, those places are equally strong or flexible, right? You may forward bend, and then you have to backward bend in order to make sure that when you're standing up straight, you're standing up straight, right? It does make sense. Yeah, we should have to pull in one direction every now and then to pull back to the center.
Just so you know where the health center is.
Yeah, very, very true. Well, let's this again, this audience, this is I for all of the audience, I don't know why I keep feeling the need to apologize for this like kind of off center conversation, because I do want you've been incredibly valuable to me, but I do want to also use this as an opportunity to kind of explore a little bit of how did Josh get to this place, because the idea of sitting in your apartment in Brooklyn all day, I mean, granted, we both kind of have the same thing. I talk to people about making comic books, and you talk to them about how to like come back to reality after an ayahuasca trip. But that's not an unusual. I mean, that's not a standard job, right? That's not nobody goes into the guidance counselor and they said, well, we looked at your tests, and I think you're going to stay home and talk to people who came off of an ayahuasca trip.
No, I mean, this job is like at a minimum 25 years in the making, and then like became what feels like inevitable in the last 4 years, I guess. It was just like, it was sort of like an offshoot of what I was already doing, which is like teaching the physical yoga practice. So like you can say what I do is sort of the deeper yogas, or the deep, whatever it is that you want to. I mean, I definitely speak a lot of yogic language in my work, but also like, I borrow from the Bible and the Tao and life. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
But yeah, no one really signs up for this, but I will say that when I had my mystical experience about a decade ago, I had no one like me. And I was scared.
I bet.
And, it's like, that's when I knew I knew how to do this, whatever this is. Yeah. This is sort of like you've watched Josh from yoga teacher to, whatever it is that you want to call that I've done sort of like throughout, but like, it's just getting more and more distilled. It's just sort of getting sort of like to the point where, in fact, very little of what I do in here is like, would be considered yoga. Like, you have already, by the time you get to me, you have done the yogas, whatever they are.
Yeah.
You have done the things, whatever, and then I definitely don't want to be anyone's first stop on their journey. I need to be like second to last or last stop, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I would say that your experiences, obviously all of us, our experiences make us unique, right? They make us the reason, like, you are a very specific solution to a specific problem. But I did want to explore a little bit. Where does that 25 years start? Where for you? Yeah, I mean, that's a very specific number. Like, is there a moment 25 years ago or wherever?
It probably makes it more than 25. Injuring my back in my early 20s. So, I mean, I started looking into yoga as a way to heal back pain. And that brought me into that I had say in how my body feels, if that makes sense.
Right.
And then also back then I was having pretty wild visions and dreams that only made sense 25, 30 years later, that like the universe was trying to talk to me, but mostly I was just scared and like, I don't know what this is, or that was a bad dream. Those things kind of added up to, well, actually the dream was trying to tell me something, and the dream was actually, the dream that was started in my early 20s was, finished in my late 30s, if that makes sense.
Well, so where are you? Where are you in life? Where you're, I mean, I know that you're from Tennessee. Am I getting that right? You grew up in and around Memphis. How does a Southern boy like you end up? I say this as a Texan, but how do you end up in a yoga studio, or even going down that path to try and find solutions for a back injury? I mean, many of the people that you and I both grew up with, that would lead to, an oxy addiction.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one, proximity was down the street from my apartment. Sorry about that. I don't know what that's going on. Yeah, desperation, but also like there's a yoga studio down the street, and probably a lot of girls go there, and I'm in my 20s, and
Yeah, 100%.
So that, but sort of like, this is like all journeys, you go thinking it's going to be something, and then becomes completely not that. Memphis, going to, I think there were 2 yoga studios in Memphis at the time. And I don't know, I was definitely, kind of out there, but I also, like, as a kid, I was like, if it's out there, I want it, because I definitely don't want any of this uptight Christian world. So if it's something else, I want it, because it's I was, my upbringing sort of, I mean, this sort of also part of my journey is just the friction of growing up in a very intense Christian culture and being, I felt like I was going to hell.
Yeah.
And it's a tough way to grow up. But I also knew that, and my mom knew that at like 3 years old, this kid's different. And
Yeah.
I was not gonna bend, even if it meant I didn't get to go out and play on Sundays because I didn't go to church.
I'm sure. All right.
If
So
you
you said,
if you want the full
oh
full
no,
Josh.
that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the full Josh. So your yoga practice starts in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And then my understanding is, you go through kind of standard young adult stuff. You end up getting married. You end up working you were a teacher for a while. Am I right?
Yep.
Yeah, public school teacher. And
You talk about
somewhere
back
along,
pain. Holy crap, my back hurt during teaching.
I have no doubt. Where were you teaching and what level?
Middle school, 6th grade, science
Middle, 6th grade science in New York.
in New York.
Yeah. Okay. So you're teaching, and at
Moving
some
on.
point, no, I'm kidding. I'm just trying to give texture. So you're teaching. At some point, you decide you're going to switch careers to be, which is not uncommon to work in real estate. How long were you doing that?
Started in 2007, right before the 2008 financial collapse.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And which actually worked out well for me. I don't know why, but I'm good at riding the lows of things, apparently.
Yeah.
I'm good at finding, I don't know, we'll call it the underworld. I'm pretty good at finding it wherever I go. But anyway, I did that for 7-ish years, something like that. And that's basically like towards the end of that is when yoga really picked up, and committed to the practice pretty hardcore. Sort of towards the end of that commitment, my body really started to kind of, yoga broke me.
Yeah.
And by the way, like, sorry, yogis, you can go too far. I went too far in the physical realm. And from there, it was like this thing that I was really relying on for mental stability and physical health, was now hurting me. And so I had to go even deeper than that. And that's when I experienced my version of the soup. And from then on, I was being recruited by a pretty big company in New York. And when I went to interview, I was just like, I don't think I'm going to do much for you. I'm really sorry. I just like, they were in the process of hiring me, but I knew that I was going sort of through this change, and like I did essentially nothing for them, but they were well aware. So from there,
yeah.
that's when I was just like, that's when it was like, I knew that I needed to, I knew that I was done with the type of yoga that I was doing. I was not, like my body would not let me go there, would not let me do it. But I knew that like through the yogic practice is where I got, that experience. And I just kind of assumed that every high-end yoga teacher had that, and no, they don't. So there was a little bit of disappointment sort of like moving through. Like I was basically looking for somebody to be like, hey, I see you. I see what's going on. Here's the path. Here's what you can do. And I just didn't have that. And for like 3 months of my life, I'm not sure my feet hit the ground. And then for another 6 months of my life, it was just like, okay, feet are kind of on the ground, but I don't really know what to do with this energy that is now a part of my life, which sounds very vague. So you could ask me some questions to clarify.
I would love to get to the the concrete behind the metaphorical. So put me into, so you're finishing this, you're being offered this job by this big real estate firm, right? And you're realizing that this is not going to work. At some point, when you say you spent 3 months without your feet hitting the ground, is this before you left them? Are you 3 months in your head in the clouds? Like,
No, so I never really I mean, like, I left by not how would I say this? Real estate, you're a 1099 employee. You don't have to do anything. They just take a piece of your, it's like I didn't need to do anything for them. They want to hold my license in case at some point I go back to making money like I was before, right? The reason they were recruiting me. But I told him, like, I told the manager of the place that wanted me very, very clearly, I don't know what's going on. That I was like, something's going on. So, like, I said, something's going on before, like, they're hiring me. I have my experience. I go back in to, like, sign these papers of, like, I'm working for them. And I'm like, man, I was just like, I really don't know how this is going to go. But, I had a team of people, and there was one guy that came with me that made a ton of money for them. Yeah. And I'm very happy for him. I'm very happy for them. That all worked out really well. And yeah, so, like, I didn't really need to be in any office. So I didn't really know what to do. I was just sort of like, somebody gave you this golden sword, and currently you're just going to, like, sit there and hold it. And, I don't know if you remember Robin, that teacher at the place. She was great. Houseman? No, not at, no. This was the Bikram place.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I was asking her for help, and she just never really had the time. And then I saw her 2 months after that experience, and she was, like, helping somebody else. And she looked over at me and she goes, "Oh, I see it happened." And I was like, "What?" And she goes, And I was like, uh-huh. So we had a little bit of a conversation, but, she was just not really necessarily available. It was sort of the first recognition from somebody that I was like, whoa, okay. And then she started talking to me, like, a little bit. She's like, "What kind of magic are you going to study?" And I was just like, this is, like, the 1,000th time I've heard people talk about magic. And I'm just like, I grew up and magic is evil. And this is, it's like, people are asking me about magic. And I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about, essentially. And now if anyone is to ask, like, what mediums do I work in? It's like, I work in material, but I also work in magic. It's sort of like making the magic material, as it were. Which is to say, I don't really know what magic is, other than there are some unexplainable mysteries that happen, and sometimes they just come through, and they're wonderful.
I can attest to that. I can, it's funny you mentioned that, and I will say that a lot of the things that you've said over the years about teaching have stuck with me, and I've been able to kind of integrate into some of the work that I do. One of those is, I remember we were talking, this is back, you and I are practicing together on a very regular basis. And there was a new student in the room, and I'm like, after the class, I'm like, they're really struggling with a couple things. I feel like they're kind of new. And you said, yeah, sometimes when you're new, you just kind of have to flop around a little bit until you can even hear what's being said.
Yeah.
And this idea of, well, just letting people flail was like, what? You're a teacher. Isn't your job to teach? But having been through this now with several times, I realized, and having been a student in these kinds of places, you can hear the same conversation, the same dialogue, the same cues. You can hear the same instructions, no matter what you're doing. 1,000 times, and then something about the 1,001th time, you're going to go, oh, okay, that makes sense now.
I think anything anyone is doing is language acquisition. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's you are learning to speak the language of whatever it is that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to another country and you don't speak the language, you're going to flop around for a while until you figure out the language and the flow of what's going on. I mean, most of what I work in is language. Is how are we taking these words, these images, because like we have automaticity, we don't know how to not put a word on an image. It's like, how do we take those things and put the rubber on the road and drive it, or like turn it into a comic book or whatever it happens to be? It's like something is coming through. Now let's start to parse it out, because that came through as a mysterious, magical thing. And now the onus is on you. It's like the universe is saying, come to me. I will feed you. I will give you what you need to do. And if you do it, and if you take from it, it will just keep giving you more, because it knows that you want to dance. Like if you want to play with the universe, it will play. But you really have to understand that it's the one leading the dance.
Yeah, I see that. Going back to, I mean, even using yoga as a metaphor, right? Using that overlay. If we talk about being in a class with a teacher, if that teacher is seeing you hear the cue, hear the instruction, and then interact, that teacher is more likely to give you more than the other 30 people in the room. Like that is the reason that they're there. And I see that as, that is how the nature of the universe works, is if we see attention given, we give attention back.
Yes.
I can see that. Yeah.
The other sort of metaphor that I play with my clients is that sometimes the things that are come through so fast, and they want to stop everything and slow it down and like try to make meaning immediately. And I'm just like, you and me are standing at a shore break and the waves are breaking on us right now. We don't need to try to make meaning of these waves. We just need to let them hit us, and then we will start to learn that the wave comes up, the wave hits us, the wave goes down. And then we start to learn the language of the waves. And now we can decide, do we want to be on the shore? Do we want to surf these waves? Do we want to go a little deeper where it's not even going to break on us? And so like that way, it lets the experience come through versus the like needing to. I think understanding is often overrated. I think experience is underrated. So to be able to experience the wave versus needing to mathematically chart the wave, two very different things. And because experience is always basically like you're narrating your experience, right? And we're often unreliable narrators. Like, oh, this is what this means. Well, guess what? Tomorrow, that's not what it's going to mean, right? Let's have the experience. And then we can choose to put whatever meaning we want on it as we get enough time to learn language.
And I think as you gain those experiences, I mean, you're going to hopefully become more accurate in your description of what that experience was. But it doesn't change what the experience was. It's just a matter of your vocabulary, right? In discussing it. I mean, that's the history of science and mathematics. It's, I can throw a ball at you and you're going to catch that ball. It takes, trigonometry to understand the arc of that ball. All it's on its way to you. I don't need to understand trigonometry in order to catch the ball, but I do need to practice throwing and catching the ball. so that, whatever I'm processing is whatever, moving around the material body in the world is understanding that arc of the ball coming at me. Right.
Yep.
I guess. Yeah.
No, I mean,
All right.
so to say, my work is throw the ball, catch the ball, not the let's mathematically chart this so that we understand what it is. It's like, all we're doing is throwing the ball and catching the ball. We're not leaving that out. If you want to go back later and do the math behind that, that is okay. But that kind of knowledge is great. The experience is sort of what we're here for. And that's sort of like the big work is just, noticing. Pretty simple. What's going on here? Not like let's do an equation or a tensor equation on how all this is going on. Those things are wonderful, and that I don't have the je ne sais quoi of tensor equations. I can't speak to quantum mechanics. I can read about it and understand it in like from an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
But for me to sort of get into like my game is experience, like not the checklist, I guess. If that makes sense.
People like checklists, though.
No, I think checklists are super valuable, but let's take this back to Prana DM. We can make checklists forever. But if we don't do it from the lens of the middle, then the checklist runs the show, right? If the checklist is coming from this inner calling and you are serving that first, that to me is a good checklist. But if the checklist is, I need to do this, this, and this, and this because I need this many likes and I need this many clients and I need this, whatever it happens to be, it's like that misses the point, which is like, I think when you and I were talking about building this thing is like, what is driving you? Like, what is the thing that's coming through you? What are you best at? Like, let's do the thing, like Plato. It's like, what's good? What's true? What's beautiful? Follow beauty, baby. Go for it. Like, what's the most beautiful form of Adam is like I see you when I was at your 50th birthday party, you talked to everyone in there and everyone, obviously it's your birthday party. So you're not inviting people that don't know you, but like, it was everyone from the industry at Comic-Con, right? That was like at your party. And like, they know and respect you. And, there was just like, how to dance in that world. And like, I just want like the beautiful Adam that dances in the middle of all of this stuff that's going on. Because I think that's, that's your calling. Unfortunately, I don't care how much money you make. I care how happy you are.
Well, it turns out money's a little helpful, but that is the key. And I think
that is to say, if you weren't doing something that made you happy, it would in the long term be unsustainable.
That's true. That is 100%
right. So it's
true.
like you do follow your passion, and there's a big difference of like committing to and betting on yourself, which I think this podcast and your company is like you're betting on yourself, so you better be yourself, which I think you do. So.
Yeah, and I look back on times when I was not gaining as much ground as I would like, and then invariably those are times when I'm legitimately trying to be what I think this job, this need, whatever this is, needs, as opposed to just saying, okay, well, what is the most I, being me, can bring to this problem, this challenge, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of trying to like be you in that position, what is the me that looks like that? And I go back to, I think this is a really interesting conversation because so much of my day-to-day existence is about, both work, the comics world, the comics industry, working with different people, being with a family, being a father, seeing that, how instruction does work, does not work, how being an example works and does not work, those kinds of things, obviously having a relationship, but also the yoga practice. Like those are the big key columns of my life. And in the yoga practice, I know that like when I am trying to be someone else, for instance, like there's a pose you and I know well called a standing bow in the type of practice that I'm doing right now. And one of the first people I ever saw
that shall remain unnamed.
the very first people that I saw doing it, the person who shall remain unnamed. I think about him and his instruction and how he does it, and he has an incredible practice. He's an incredible teacher.
I just meant the practice would remain
unnamed. The practice. Oh, whatever. I'll talk about.
No, I love Jared.
Yeah,
the other one's just a rapist.
That's true. Bikram Chowdhury is a rapist, and I still do his yoga. We can talk about why that is.
Or alleged rapist, whatever.
Yeah, it's funny. when I think about Bikram, I'm gonna go back to Jared, but just to take a sideline there, I do this what's called hot yoga now, but when it was marketed to a Western audience, it was known as Bikram yoga. And, Bikram Chowdhury brings, like many other Indian yogis, brings yoga to the West and needs to package it for an American audience. And the things that he did that made it work really well for an American audience is, one, he turned the heat up, because it turns out you're more flexible when it's hot. Two, he made us face mirrors because we're Americans and we need to be able to see ourselves, and we, in order to kind of translate what's being said. And three, he did the same poses in the same sequence every time. And certainty, right. And so you can really dig deep into some of those things. Now, another quote of yours, all dogma breaks. We can get to that in a minute, because, I doing this forever is not sustainable either. But when I think about why I'm okay with, Bikram yoga, it's, for me, if you look at the history of this practice, he wasn't the only one developing it. Like he had, he opened a studio in Hollywood, and all these people came to it and they understood it and they stayed. And it was through them that was developed as well. Right. Mm-hmm. Some of those voices are now teaching as well. So you look back on it and, it was their questions and their prodding and their pushing that developed some of these things. But he didn't do all of this on his own. And so in many ways, he
borrowed heavily from his brother too.
And indeed. And he didn't create Hatha yoga, which is what he's doing. Mm-hmm. All he did was say, let's do this checklist. Right. So for me, it's not about Bikram, the man, the rapist. It's about the practice that was developed by Bikram and his followers and those mm-hmm. people who showed up. And continue to develop it, right? It's the practice. The dialogue is different now.
Can I yes and you here? I think if you watch any documentary on any sort of movement practice or anything, you're going to find some sort of problem with it.
100%.
And the only real question is, whether it's a ballet practice, a Feldenkrais practice, a gyrotonics practice, if you're practicing with Patabi Joyce, if you're doing Iyengar, if you're doing Bikram, if you're doing Kundalini, which I think there's some documentary, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Which is all they're all saying these people are snake oil salesmen, et cetera, et cetera. Does that take away from the fact that whoever was doing that practice had some sort of deep experience? It maybe changed their life, maybe changed their mind, maybe they had some mystical experience. You can't take that away from that person just because, the teacher was everyone is human, everyone makes mistakes. I'm not saying I condone any sort of rapist type mistakes, and I maybe cut that actually. But you can't really take away I'll hear that sometimes, people would talk about the Bikram thing, and I was done with Bikram before the whole sort of thing came out, and I was just I still can't take away that it absolutely transformed me. I don't do it anymore because it's no longer for me. Right. I ran my course with it.
Yeah.
And it's when you get the message on the phone, hang up, right? I got the message, I'm done, I hung up, I'm done. But it doesn't mean I didn't learn, and also like through that I started to learn the Sanskrit language, so that when I was working with Naveen, it was like, the language I got, so let's go. And for me, language acquisition is a bit, as I was saying, is like a big part of this. And if you're to work with Naveen, it's coming hot, it's coming heavy, and it's coming at you, and you better be like in your zone, in your middle, and it will come through, and then you can really play. And like I knew, certainly working with Naveen, when I could play back with her.
Yeah.
I could just sort of, play back and forth with her. I was just like, oh, this is it. Because she definitely, like, there was no guru there. It was just like, she brought me, I wouldn't say, she was just like there and was like, dance with me. And it was like, you could feel the equality there versus like, I've got some whammy that I'm going to keep from you until you keep sweeping these floors and washing these yoga mats or whatever. It's like, no.
Yeah.
She was like, she already knew I had my whammy, and she was helping me. Like, to be honest, she was probably a big part of my integration work, 8 years after my mind was blown.
Since we're having this
huge part.
Since we're having a conversation in front of other people, I will say that's a Naveen Mishan, who has a practice called Katona Yoga, Katona. And
H.
it was H. Oh, it ends in H. That's right. Katona. Big, huge influence on you, and through you, huge influence on me. Really incredible practice, an incredible way of thinking about the natural world, and the people around you. If your tolerance for woo woo is low, and you're not into mysticism and numerology and those sorts of things, there's some barriers for entry for you. But if you're willing to listen to some of that, even just to get past it, I think it's an incredible way of looking at the world. That's actually, it's funny that you mentioned her and the fact that we're talking about Jared, who, for me, like watching him was as a standard. Every time I try and live up to his standard, I end up hurting myself. But
yeah, when
I try and be me, my version of what he is, him being his version, that's when I start finding that the move. My standing bow is much further along once I decided to start being me. But talk about one of the things that Naveen, who has an incredible following, she has people all over the world practicing and teaching this type of yoga, refuses to be called a guru. And I know you have some thoughts on that too. And honestly, this goes back to kind of what we were talking about. There's a documentary about Osho.
I'm not interested in any gurus.
Right.
Or priests, what's the difference?
What's the difference between a teacher, someone you value, someone that you're, really?
Well, guru just means teacher, but in the Western or yoga meaning, guru comes up as like a it's like in India, like if you're a guru, you're like Shri, whatever your name is, right? It's like this title that puts you on this pedestal that makes it seem like you have some sort of hidden wisdom. And yeah, there was never any of that with her. There are some teachers that are like, we'll call it that I've had this kind of like, oh, there's like a power with that sort of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the question there of like my relationship with gurus?
Yeah, the word guru. How do you react to that? Because there have been plenty of people in our time together where you've been teaching. Like there was a crew of us, and I'm going to put it in mostly 2018, where we were together nearly every day, and you were kind of the figurehead of that. And I legitimately had people talk about you as a guru, and I'm like, I don't know that he wants to be, even thought of as that way. But I always thought of you as just...
You've seen that I pulled out of that.
Yeah, you did. But I think it was, for us, that crew was like, we were all growing and we were all changing and developing together. And I think we all embraced the idea of community, but I don't think any of us, at least in that core group, really thought of you as a guru, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think, to go back to our previous conversation, I mean, certainly in that practice, I was just trying to show up and talk through as vulnerably as I could what it meant for me to practice. So like when we were talking about camel the other day, all I'm doing is like showing you how I move consciousness through my body and what I may be thinking about and what may come up and how I can play it. And yeah, I mean, I try to, like, as much as I can, get out of the way of the whatever's coming through, right? But I definitely felt as the teaching sort of, as I got hired around by more places, I just didn't really feel right. There's like, my ego gets too pinged by people listening to me, and I don't know. It just felt like you got to get out of here. This isn't good for you. And I mean, it kind of led me to just like a strictly private yoga practice, and then the private yoga plus, like, I've always been doing sort of the like helping people with mystical sort of situations, regardless of plant medicine or not. And yeah, that I think, you never know why anyone does anything. And I think that was just the universe is like, get out of here. You don't belong here. I mean, also like the pandemic, the pandemic ejected me. That was it. Like I was scheduled to do and co-wrote the curriculum for yoga teacher training starting March 17th. I think it was the day that the city shut down and the pandemic. So, bye-bye money for that. And then like, actually from that, and then like from working with people sort of online and then sort of moving back into the private thing, it just allows me to, I don't know, a lot of my practice has so much less to do with teaching and more or less like listening and just being like, okay, I hear you. And like, I say so much less now. It's just like, as you said, like kind of letting people flail around until they kind of like, I'm basically a witness while someone comes to their own Jesus. It's like they kind of talk themselves into it. I do guide, right? I guide, but sorry, I realized when I scoot close to the microphone, it probably gets hot, so I'm gonna stay back here.
Oh, it's all right. It works. I can see how I personally have seen. Well, obviously, you and I remain friends, and we still see each other 2 or 3 times a week when we're in the zone. Occasionally, we go in and out of that zone. But so I've seen you develop through that and become this version of your, let's call it your practice, right? So really in many ways though, like what you've gone through has just been a series of experiences that you're just sharing with other people. There's been no curriculum that you've gone through, right? You don't have like a doctorate in psychology to teach people how to deal with, a psychedelic experience. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, there are texts, on, you can certainly read, Doors of Perception or Mircea Eliade or people that are talking about mystical experiences. But like that to me is not really the important. It's like, I can only talk from my personal experience, and, that one that I had was not the only one. They happen sort of semi-regularly, and I mean, for some of my deeper work, I have to kind of put myself in a quasi state, not
Right.
necessarily that. I mean, at this point, it's mildly easily accessible to do that.
Well, Naveen talks about how once you've been to the destination, it's easier to get to the destination, right? You know that you know the way there, and
the way back. Very importantly, because I do like to return back to my body and the ground and cheeseburgers and beer.
All right, I think it'd be interesting now to talk about some of your experiences, and I would love for those of my comics listeners who have listened to this for an hour, I'd love to give them the nugget of talking about one particular friend of ours who did give me permission to talk about his experience, an artist named Liles LaRosa. Lewis is, I mean, he is arguably the best draftsman of our generation. His technique is, I mean, it's so difficult to even quantify how incredible it is. But he, as a result of that, like that work, his body really kind of takes the brunt of the finely detailed drawing that he does. And I was working for a publisher. We were working with Lewis. He was having a very difficult time creating that work, and when we talked to him about it, it was because of the physical nature of it, like the physical nature of his pain. And we were trying to figure out some way to help, and I suggested you because I knew how much you had helped me, and I'd seen you help others who were dealing with stuff like this. And it was because of that, for me, the insight was that he was physically, his practice, the way he held himself was what was causing it. So therefore you could, have something to do. Talk about that experience with Lewis. Like, where did you come in, and what was that? What did you see when I would introduce you to this problem?
I mean, for lack of a better term, he was like in it when your company that you're working for flew me down to Atlanta to meet him. And I could immediately see anxiety in the body. I guess I should say that I read people's bodies as part of Naveen taught me quite a bit of that.
Can we pause there? Can we talk about that just really quickly? Body reading. I understand some of this, but how would you encapsulate it?
I should use the caveat that for the most part, I try to not do that much. I try to let the person that I'm working with sort of tell me what's coming through. But then like any child who's like, they kind of like, nothing's going on, that like there are some real obvious tells. And I could see that Lewis was worried about being able to I don't know how much I'm at liberty to say, but like I could just see that there was like an existential pain that was happening, that the work that sustains him is also killing, or like, bring out the worst possibility of like him not being able to work because of the work, if that makes sense. Like he's so good at what he does. It's so intense. And can't remember if it was pen or pencil. One day I was like, I need you to just like show me what it is. And he showed me, and like his body position and like how it was going, and sort of I was like, I need you to just talk me through emotions. What's going on here? And then do a little bit more and like talk me through the emotions. And it was just like, okay, number one, not breathing. Right? Just holding breath, getting the line perfect. Okay, now breath. So it's like, okay, well, now we need just to understand, like, what does it mean to just sort of like breathe, move. And I didn't want to change his drawing style, right? It's very specific. But basically to work with, like, to go with, one of the things that I do, and this is taught to me by a structural integrationist, is like, sometimes you have to go into their pattern to unwind the pattern. You don't just want to pull them out. Sometimes you have to like go really far the way that they want to go. And so for me, it was just like, how do we understand what he's feeling, how he's holding himself. All right, if you need to hold your breath when you're doing this, where are the other places we can breathe, right? And what are the body positions and sort of that? And then, I guess I can say that I've been in that sort of situation too before, which is just, the reason I started the yoga practice is like, it feels existential. You're like,
yeah,
I haven't been able to walk normally for 2 weeks. Something's wrong here. And Lewis,
do I need to quit my job, right? Do I need to quit my job? Do I need to divorce whoever I'm with? Do I need to, like, what change do I need to make because of my body won't let me do what I'm doing?
So,
oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Hold.
No, that was me.
There you go. Yeah, okay.
I have 10% battery. Which should be enough.
Okay.
Not and keep this thing going, but I think we should be good for 10 more percent.
Okay.
I'll give you the 5 when it's at 5%.
Perfect.
But for Lewis, it was emotional. It was emotional for me. It was like, man, I know. I could feel his struggle. I could feel his pain. And in fact, like, I don't know where he is now in his journey. I don't know how much better he's doing. I just know that, like, through our work, we're just kind of working on tools. Like, when these things arise, try this. When these things arise, try this. Just like, here's as many tools as I can give you for the amount of time that I have with you. And one of the cool things is, one of my clients asked me, is like, is it really cool to watch when somebody has their aha moment or when they start feeling better or whatever? And it's like, actually, I almost never see it. It usually happens away from me, right? It's like,
yeah.
So, like, for you, I remember we had a conversation over breakfast or whatever, and it was like 2 weeks later, you called me when you landed in LA, and you're like, it's the soup. And I was like, huh? Right? So, like, you're just one that actually, like, because we're friends, you reported it to me, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it just happens, like, I have one of my clients is like an artist, and I could feel her irritation rising, and I kind of called her out. I was just like, I could feel you pulling away from whatever's coming up. There's something going on that you need to do. I don't know what it is, but you need to do it. And I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later, she did whatever that thing was. And then she walked in. Her face is different. Her eyes are different. Her hair is different. I was just like, holy shit, you did it. And she's like, I did. And I was like, okay, now let's go. And so now it's like, now the work can begin. And there's like crying and hugging. And it's like, it's like sometimes these blocks that we have in us are really, they are personal. You might not want to like do it, and, like, might not happen in front of me. It's like, for her, it was like an action within the world that needed to happen. Right. And
yeah.
So, like, it's cool to be able to, like, see the fruits of the labor, but I don't always, like, with Lewis, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know the fruits of his labor.
I can tell you, he's still putting out spectacular work. That company that I was working with, Bad Idea, is still. They just showed some of his work last week, and it was phenomenal. Cool. I will say that I reached out to Lewis to make sure that it was okay that we talk about him. I was gonna, we were probably gonna talk about him. I just wouldn't use his name. But he says, I always breathe through my nose now, thanks to Josh. And I still use his stretches and mobility exercises all throughout the day. His lessons are essential for my pain management years on.
Wow.
So,
It is years on. It was 2 years ago or something. It was a while ago.
Something like that. Yeah, it has been a minute. Yeah. He also, in that conversation, noted that, watching this story about Luigi Mangione, I don't know. I don't think I've heard it actually pronounced before. The guy who shot the CEO. He said that it really hits home reading about how
Are you surprised that I know that? I'm surprised that I know that, but it's a fun. Okay, go ahead.
There's a point where even those of us who like choose to disconnect from daily news, eventually it gets to even us.
No, I mean that is made for TV ready. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and he is like that guy is. Look, they actually, come to think of it, he and Lewis look a lot alike, in their build and fitness. Anyway, he said it really hits home reading about how his back pain and surgery changed him. Like it's, that kind of pain really does affect you, not only physically, but emotionally, and the way you see the world. It really does. So it shouldn't be surprising that the reverse is also true, right? That when you are in a healthy place, when you're embracing these practices, this breath work, the movement practices, the meditation, those things, like it shouldn't be surprising that also affects how you see the world and how you experience the things that are coming at you.
Yeah, and I would say as somebody that went through all of the yogas. The thing that you are thinking about yourself when you make any movement, that's probably the most important. More than what you're doing, more than how you breathe. It's like, if you think you're broken, you're broken.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for really getting to the bottom of all the emotions that we hide in the body, so that you can finally get to the ground of being, or the inner child, or the spirit, or whatever it is that you want to call that thing. Because if you operate from that point, I've yet to have pain that wasn't like an injury, right? So like if I step on a tack, ouch, I don't have,
right.
I'm not that much of a yogi that I'm like, oh yeah, go ahead and cut my foot off. That'll be fine. That's not the case. But, and this didn't come from my mystical experience. This came from just like, okay, now what do I do with this? Being able to understand, are you looking at the time?
I am. I just, I'll say this for if we're still recording it. I apologize. Something caught my attention. We're putting a book to bed this week, and we're coming up on a deadline. So
Okay.
So I've got people saying, if you have any notes, now's the time. So
give them notes. So yeah, I have 9% battery. But anyway, all that to say is like, the thing that has changed my life bodily is, the not identifying with the pain, not identifying with a person that needs to protect from some sort of thing, right? Anyway, including my major back injury in my 20s, like the injury is there. If you were to look at an MRI, it would look like I shouldn't be walking around like a normal person, but and a lot of the work was just like getting to the bottom of, I'm okay, and being okay with like whatever is, and not needing to be protecting anymore from whatever this pain that we put so many protections around it. When it's gone, we still are just holding on to this protection. Kind of like trauma, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that ownership of your body is something that I've gained from all of this. Is this like my understanding of what was under my skin was just like I think the author Tom Robbins referred to it as this black void, right? Like I don't really want to think about what's happening inside of here. Like it's just this thing. Like I feel weird. Oh, I must be sick, right? I feel bad. Oh, I must go to the doctor and just take whatever he tells me. But instead in taking ownership of that, like for instance, I was just having a struggle with my knee, and it was, the practice was in some ways exacerbating that, and I realized because of the work that we've done, oh no, it wasn't the practice, it was how I'm dealing with the practice and how I'm standing and how I'm thinking about these what does standing up straight mean. And this is a pattern that I keep falling into over and over and over again. But yeah, I think it is that sort of that interoception, that proprioception, that understanding that this body is also me, right? That while I can be part of the soup, I still own all of this. It's my job to keep this performing.
Totally.
Yeah. I think that has been a huge insight. I would credit you with a lot of that, but it's just the work that we have done, kind of side by side for going on a decade now. It's been a while. So, well, not yet. We're you and I are still learning. I think that's one of the things that you and I have always connected on is we're both curious about what's next. And we're both trying to explore some other mode or some other thought because all dogma breaks. And so you need to find new paths.
It's fun to play.
Yeah, it surely is.
It's fun to play. And then mix and match.
How do you think, we're both middle-aged guys. We both have kids. We both have partners and careers. How do you think now about aging? We both have parents who are, at the end of their lives. How do you feel like having bodies like this, like now that we're involved, now that we kind of feel the insides, how is that going to change aging for you, for us?
It's something that it's almost been it's interesting that you asked that question because it's like been the most at the fore for me. Which is to say, I'm very curious about the decay. I'm very curious about the, there are things I can't really do that well anymore. That 10 years ago, easy peasy.
Yeah.
Probably 40 pounds heavier than my Bikram whatever days, but I sure don't have the pain that I did back then. That's for sure. Yeah, aging is really interesting. That the question may take a while to answer, and I don't know that you have the time for that. But just to say, I'm fascinated with it. There's just this real level of acceptance, like going downhill and allowing myself to go downhill is really nice. And in fact, I can do a bunch of things I couldn't do in my, we'll call it like supreme yoga days. Yeah. Just because now I am looking for the path of least resistance. Like, well, what gets this done? And sometimes it's like, what could I be thinking to help this movement happen more easily? And it's real. It's just like a daily curiosity. Whereas before, it was like always trying to be better, always trying to reach the pinnacle. I can't think of a bigger fallacy than the top of a mountain or trying to climb because there's just nothing there. But the going down that mountain has been really, the thing is like, you also can't take that away. It's like, you do have to climb the mountain and you do have to find that there's nothing there, only to go back down to the bottom of the mountain to understand that, There's a lot to be learned in the depths of things. So I don't know. It has changed that things are just very I'm like super curious about, boy, what does my forward fold look like with a big old belly after having pizza and beer? And I don't even have half the physical yoga practice that you do currently. But how to say this? There's so little I have to do now. I mean, I'm doing like movement.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in like Feldenkrais type movement. There's a lot of breathing things that I do that are a little bit modern, putting my body in certain positions. But good old-fashioned walking is pretty awesome. And then, like, to get, to do it Josh's weird way, like I go meet Abe at the stairs in the middle of the park. We do all these kind of, like, we're just, like, playing with our body, walking up and down stairs. And, like, I'll do 10 rounds. It's not like I'm running up and down the stairs. It's just, like, I'm seeing what it's like to let my head go loose. Now I'm seeing what it's like to get my chest to go loose. These are kind of things that I don't think I would have done in my 20s or 30s because I would be afraid of what someone's thinking of when I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm almost 50, I don't give a shit. I'm just like, what feels good?
It's funny you say that. I've been back at it. I've been back in the Bikram hot room, and there was one day
with wisdom.
Right. It's a different practice for me now than it was even 15 years ago when I started. I remember, I've got a bit of a dad bod. I got a belly that is just very pronounced and soft, a little jiggly. Part of the practice is you're staring at yourself in the mirror and you're 105 to 109 degree room with 40 to 60% humidity. Like it's, if you're wearing a shirt, you're hurting yourself. This is really where I've come to. And so, I'm just standing there in a pair of shorts every day. And there was a day where I'm looking at myself and going, oh, man, I just wish I could I don't know why. Occasionally this still comes to me. I feel really comfortable with who I am right this second. But occasionally I'm like, oh, I wonder if I ever get rid of this again, And I'm looking around the room and at all these like younger, fitter people. And I realized, oh, for some of these people, if they could do what I can do, like if they went through this class and got through into some of the poses that are just easy for me, they would go have a cheeseburger after. They would it wasn't matter to them that they don't only have 2% body fat because they for me, some of these things are just my body does these things because it's I am strong in these areas. In some places I'm working, in some places I'll never get any further because my body is not going to find that again.
And what is yoga beyond self-acceptance?
100%. 100%.
I don't know. I don't think there's anything beyond it.
Mm-mm.
Or maybe the acceptance that there is no self if you're swimming in the soup. Or the acceptance that there is no self and there is a self, both practice.
I think there is this this push-pull, this yin-yang, if you will, of I am perfect the way I am because I am the only me, and therefore this me that is right now is the only me there is. And also, but I still want to head in this direction. I don't necessarily need to reach a goal, but I'm going to keep heading in this direction because I enjoy this walk, right? But heading in this direction actually gives me more joy than sitting it still. And I think there's that feels like it's antithetical, and yet it's truly the only way I've been able to enjoy either one. Yeah,
I mean, it's the paradox of existence. It's you both have inertia of non-movement in the middle of the hub, and you get to be the outside of the wheel, and you get to roll where you're going.
We've been at this for
and I want to go back to, you were saying something before. were saying something about, I can't remember what it was, but we're basically talking about kind of the inner Adam, sort of
Sure.
being true to the self or whatever. But there's a point where like you realize that like you can now, sort of like playing off what we're saying, is that you get to put on, well, like once you know who you are, once you've like swam in the sea, you get to put on any mask you want and play whatever game you want. But because before the mask owns you, right?
Yeah.
And now you realize that you're just the thing that's putting on a mask as you decide. I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of slippery slope to where the mask can kind of like try to reach its tentacles in and try to own you again. But like,
sure. And I think it does.
Going to what comics are, like what we live out is actually, sorry,
5%.
5%, that was the warning. What we're living out is like basically fiction, right? Like if, in the yogic terms, it's this is Maya. What you're seeing is Maya, right? But why not play?
It's the story, right? Yeah. Yeah, I 100%. I think I also, anytime that I feel myself trying to be the mask, right? Trying to change into being more of that mask is really where I start stumbling. And instead of saying, well, the people who I think of as that mask, I know I've been around enough of them that I know they're just putting this on, so I could just put this on for a little bit as well. You know, there is no, I mean, there are a few people who are naturally gifted at certain things. I will never be able to draw like Lewis. I don't.
Nope.
I think I can confidently say that. But I will.
I don't think anyone ever has.
Oh man.
And
Seriously.
maybe ever. I mean, it was funny. Is like when I started working with it, I'd never ever seen any of his stuff. And the first art that I saw was when he pulled out stuff to show me like what he was working on, and I was like, he was doing some study on dinosaurs, and I was like, holy shit! What? I was like, okay. I was like, all right, are you like what am I looking at here? It was, you know. Talk about, you know, as I met him, is like, that's somebody dying for the craft, right? Is just
100%
giving up his soul for the thing that's got to come through. And when you look at it, you're like, this is divinely inspired. He has to do this. There is no choice. Like,
yeah. And he's not somebody who's faking it till he makes it. This is just him giving what he has for this because he's capable of it. And I think that is definitely the exception. It feels like more than the rule in how most people work and how they interact with the world and give value. You know, most of us are really like, I think this is how this goes. Hey, that worked. All right, I'll do it that way again. You know, so yeah, I can definitely see how.
I mean,
is.
I would say, like, you know, if you think about a lot of great artists, it's like there's some sort of torture that's going through them, whether it be like trauma from generations past that have somehow come through him to be this amazing artist. I don't know why or how. You know, just to see his dinosaur study, I was like, okay, I can see I'm working with God here. He's a drawing God, and this is coming through. I got 4%. So if you want to do a rap or whatever, or if you basically 4% means I have like 8 minutes is my guess, maybe. So,
is there anything we haven't covered that you thought we were going to or were hoping to? Is there anything you'd like like our audience to know about you? Or do you have any questions for me that we haven't dug into?
I don't know, how's the podcast going. Like, we're doing this as like a. I feel like you and I talked about it for, I don't know, as Bad Idea was falling apart. I don't know when your first episode got released, but I remember like we were walking in the winter and we talked about this every day. Like all the time we talked about it. So like, is it delivering? Well. Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. I will say that when we started, I said to my team, I want the right 200 subscribers. That's all I want for we'll do this for a year, and if we get the right 200 subscribers, it'll be a success. And as of I think yesterday, we're at 196, and a year will be up in February. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is the right people. It has made changes in the industry.
I mean, how many comic book insiders could there be?
I mean, there are my list is, I've already got another 3 months of interviews banked, and I've got a long list of people who want to talk to me.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, the people that need to be listening to you that are on the inside. It's not like an artist, maybe an artist would want to listen, but it's like, if you're in the biz and because you know what's going on in Pittsburgh, whatever those meetings are that are going on there. And, it's like, so yeah, I mean, like, I don't know who's going to be beyond that 200, but like,
who knows?
This is, somebody was asking me, because I told them I was going to, and they're like, is his podcast successful, or whatever. And I was like, I think he's doing what he needs it to do, and he's like reaching the people that he needs to reach. But that might be like 10 people. It's because
it's the right 10 people. Yeah, exactly. No, the business has grown exponentially this year, and it really is because of this. I think that value is it. Well, listen, I don't want to lose you when your battery completely dies, and
what for?
I got a book to put to bed. Is there any message you want people who are listening to this? I mean, we're talking to people who work with their minds. We're talking about people who work, they talk to other people all day. They sit at desks all day. Is there any advice you can give? Anything you would like for people who are listening to this, like to begin maybe that journey where they begin flopping around on the mat?
Listen deeply inward. No one outside of you has anything to say, including me.
Ooh.
Certainly from anyone that acts like they know what's going on. No one knows what's going on. I would say, like, if I have, to share from personal practice, any advancement I've ever gotten in my life is from listening deeply inside, and then whatever came out of that, in fact, the only time I've ever heard anything that was external was Naveen telling me to be careful who I listen to, which to me was saying, listen inward, because no one's telling you anything that you don't already know inside. And I will say, following that for the past, certainly since the thing that I'm doing now, like getting deeper into that, that's where growth comes. Or not even growth, because sure, growth, but it's like because I listen deeply, there's no question that I'm doing the right thing.
If anyone is listening to this either or watching, and they have gone through an experience like you and I have discussed, and we've both been through, should they reach out to you? How would you like them to deal with what's next, other than listening inward? How do they reach you?
I don't have social media. How about this? They should contact you for my information.
I'll do it.
I like a few fences to I need a gauntlet before all 200 of your subscribers come to me. You can share my website. You can put it in the show notes or whatever it is that you have.
We'll be sure to.
But I'm available to work, but as I said in the beginning of the show, it's like, I need to be your last stop, not your first. So if that makes sense.
To climb some stairs before you get to that temple.
That's right. I'm there at the top of the mountain to be like, there's nothing here. Let's go down.
Thank you, buddy. I'm looking forward to our next walk, and I really appreciate you making the time for this today. Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and, telling your friends is always good, but really what we want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Girk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.